All right. Hey, everybody. And welcome to the coaching call for weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12. And you'll notice that we're kind of extending the time period for each one of the segments now. There's still a lot to cover, but I think at this stage in the game, having a little bit more time to integrate the new practices and take things to the next level will be good. And also, Brian, I'm actually excited to do this call this time because the lucid dreaming has been getting a lot better. So, and I was, one of the things that I did or have been doing, and I think we discussed this, but I have just like a calendar basically, and I can mark off like on the days when I have like a successful lucid dream, or on days where I at least made an attempt or things like that, writing down the practices. And, that's been so great because now I actually have gone back and looked through it and seen, actually what's the frequency of the lucid dreaming. And so I know now that I'm actually lucid dreaming once a week. So we have successfully completed stage 1 of the program. Level 1 pass.
Wow. You just passed your first 101 class.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This is a good thing. So
that's awesome.
And so some of the things, let's say, so some of the things I wanted to talk about was actually from the experiences of the lucid dreams that I've had. And so let's see. Well, so last night I had a pretty good sequence of lucid dreams, and one of the things that really stood out to me was how valuable all the things that you've been saying, like over the past several weeks and months of the program, have come into play and like actually affected the practice while I was in the middle of it, which is really, really cool. And that's actually kind of a new experience to be in the phenomena and to have those pointers have a real impact on what I was doing. Like it was the first time that I was having a lucid experience and the dream started to fade. And then I started to get like, almost transitioning back into my body, and the sensations of my physical body started to come back. And I had like very uncomfortable, like vibrational sensations and stuff like that. And I was like, all right, well, like you had said on the call the other night, you were like, you remind yourself like the worst thing that could happen is I could wake up, like I'm not going to die from this. Right. So I was like, I'm not going to die from this. So I was like, I might as well just, instead of trying to stop it and bring myself out of it, just relax into it and just let it keep going and take its course and get more intense or whatever. And then that started to unfold into a different lucid dream. And so that happened a couple times. And other things that you've said too that were really helpful was, so like the dream itself, the lucid dream that I went into actually took on kind of a dark quality. Like I was in a very dark place. I was in almost like these basement like tunnels. And there was all sorts of like weird, uncomfortable things. Like my teeth were like falling out of my mouth, and I was like holding them, and I was like looking at my reflection in this like furnace, and like I became like like I saw kind of my face almost like it was like a skeleton, and it was like supposed to be scary and stuff. And all these things that you'd said just came back to me. Like you were like kind of the kind of jovial quality that you tend to have with things, and how you're always like, well, like if something that's like scary like presents itself, you can just kind of play or be, I just, instead of responding with the automatic response of like outright like fear or discomfort, I had enough wherewithal or lucidity to acknowledge the phenomena that was happening that would be scary, and just kind of be like, ha, that's interesting, like that's novel, that's different, like, kind of like whatever. So I don't know, there was a lot of things that came up for me like that were really cool. And just, I woke up with the sense like, wow, all those things that you've been sharing are just like so helpful. And they're helpful when you're like practicing and before you actually initiate the experiences successfully, but like much more so once you're in it. So
Right.
that was
Yep.
very, very cool.
Well, I think a lot of those things just come from experience, and I mean, the only difference that I see between anybody and me, at least with the class or whatever, is that I've just been doing it longer. That's all. And so, a lot of these things um, are not things that I was taught initially. It was just things that over tons of repetition, you figure out over time, right? It's like, to me, it's like, there's no difference. I mean, in the end result, there may be difference, but as far as the actual ability, I mean, there's no difference between this and, learning to be a great CrossFit athlete, or, and finding out different training methods, right, that work for you the
Mm.
best. And, you listen to other people who have done certain things quicker and stronger than you, and, you try to implement them. And if you can't quite do it, you sort of like, you find these little training techniques that will sort of, modulate a little bit so that you can build up to that. It's sort of like when people go to do, a pull-up, and then they realize, they've watched people do pull-ups, and then they realize, wow, that's really hard when they try to do it. They can barely get one out or whatever. So it's like, well, if you can only get one out, how the hell do you build up to being able to do a number, right? And so somebody eventually had to figure out that, maybe I could just, if the same muscles more or less are being worked, if I just, pick myself up with my feet, stand on something taller and put myself in the end of the position, right? And then allow myself slowly to go back down until I can, do that many times. And maybe that'll translate into 2 pull-ups normally. And you just keep working it back and forth, right? And you find techniques from repetition that, if done consistently, like, here's the other thing, to just my personal thing. Like, I never give out information if I haven't proven to myself that it can be consistently used. It's like, if it's just something that I think it was just a fluke and it was idiosyncratic and, just from whatever, flying by the seat of my pants doing something, that's one thing. But it's like, I really need to, the things that I offer to you guys are the things that, I've done many, many times successfully, so that I know, like, okay, if you do this and you take this tack, this will work. And again, always with that idea, like you said, like, it's that jovial sort of quality, right? I mean, I sort of approach things with that. And, especially, I mean, some people will, when they get afraid, they get meaner or whatever. That's their default mechanism, and for me, it's more like, I see the, almost the humor in it, so I'm always trying to, maybe because I really, looking back in my life, right, it's like, I've noticed some people that were really, that they could, the thing was that they could take care of themselves, but they never pushed that agenda. If things got tense, right, and let's say a confrontation, verbal or physical, whatever, it's like, the people that I most respected were the ones that could sort of laugh their way out of it. Either get the other person to start laughing or be self-deprecating in some way, and it was always those guys that, probably wouldn't have any problem putting the trouble to rest, but they were the ones that had the most wherewithal to say, like, anything could go wrong, anything could happen. What's a better way to resolve this situation? And I think, because in the, that lucid dream territory within your subconscious, it's so real, right? It's like, it can fool you into going into your default mode, right? And so I just tried to establish the default mode that was, what you see now is a culmination of, decades of life, right? I didn't start out like this. I mean, a lot of people, this story, but I mean, a lot of people don't. It's like, I was a wallflower, right? I mean, it's like, no talkie, It's like very, very introverted, like just awkward and, just really not sure of myself. And it took a long time and conscious effort to change that. And so I would always take those people that I, looked up to and model them and say like, oh, this person really has this together. I'd like to be like that. Let me see how I can start doing that. And lucid dreaming helped with that. But it's also the place where you can prove that stuff out to yourself, right? You can test the waters with that. What's it feel like to be so confident that you can joke around with a pretty hideous image of yourself, or that's transforming or changing or whatever. And you're going like, damn, man, you need to get some more sleep. You look like shit. It's like,
yeah, totally,
on fire in the window, and you're going like, dude, you got to cool down. It's like,
yeah.
It's just one of those things, right? And it's like, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it ramps up the situation, and but it's not a constant, right? It's always sort of changing and being flexible. And I think that's one of the best things that stuff does for you.
Yeah.
And it changes the scenario so quickly, right? That it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're focused in on a little bit different thing. And then it's weird. It changes the scenario, but it also makes it more solid too, right? Because it's not as shifting. Like a lot of times, even in a lucid dream, the landscape can be a little shifting, or the scenario can feel like it's shifting too quickly. You're not really acclimating to the place. You're just sort of running through different scenarios, right? And so interacting in the way that you would ideally like to be, right? It's like that has a tendency to solidify and sort of stabilize the territory, right?
Yeah, because it's like you're acting
engaged,
more
you're
consciously.
thinking about it. You got to engage in a conscious way. That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, and the brilliant part about it, the part I love so much, is that you have such clarity there, right? You don't have all these distracting thoughts. You can
I didn't have that much clarity there. Not yet.
It'll come. It's like, it's there. Yeah. You're just not noticing it. Because even registering that stuff, I think, is a pattern that we get into here. Like, we're just so used to having a constant bombardment of thought after thought after thought after thought, stray random, crap from all the corners of whatever. And, I think we just get so used to it. It's almost like the absence of it is almost startling to us. I feel like it's a great gift. That's one of the best gifts there. Is why I think people, when they're in that scenario, their physical body gets so much more real rest, because I don't know why I don't think that it's not happening when you're not conscious of it, but I do think that acknowledging it and really engaging that as like it's like, for me, it's like a sigh of relief. Like, okay, there's some clarity there, like there's just the absence of noise that's random and sort of scattered is just such a relief. I feel like somehow that's translating back to my physical body sleeping in bed, right? That it's like, it almost makes that restorative sleep that much deeper and much more productive. So I just think that engagement in the way that you want to be, focuses your attention and somehow stabilizes the whole environment for you. And you get much more used to it, and you get much more play out of it. That's for sure.
Another thing that happened was last week I had a lucid dream where it's one of the things that was really cool about it was actually I didn't use the essential oil. I didn't have that out, but in the dream, I was in a classroom, and one of my dream signs is seeing people from high school. Like, it just happens all the time.
Yeah, sure.
So this guy comes up to me, and he's got like a bouquet of mugwort flowers, and they didn't even actually look like what mugwort flowers look like, but there was just what it was. And he like shoves them in my face, and I smell it, and I'm like, I'm dreaming, and so it was interesting just to have that experience of my subconscious kind of like putting those things in my face to like help out. But I become, lucid, and I'm like, I'm gonna fly down the hallway or whatever. And these two like old female teachers come out, like they, and with this attitude of like he's like, I'm breaking the rules, like
Where's your hall
like
pass?
come into, yeah, exactly. And I was like, no, get away from me. Like you can't, so
It's like, oh, can't catch me, can't catch me.
yeah. So, but the weird thing was, like, like I had this instinctual response to like stop them from like stopping my lucid dream or whatever, right? So I'm kind of
Right.
like trying to like punch them, and then like and then I have this thing where like I try to turn into I don't know if you ever, there's like that Stephen King movie about the girl who can like just set things on fire with her mind. So I was like,
Fire starter.
fire starter, yeah. So I was like, this kind of like spontaneous response of like, I'll just burn them, or set them on fire or whatever.
Right.
And then, and I woke up like in the transition of like trying to do that to get rid of them, you know? And as I'm waking up, like the first thing that popped into my mind was something else that you had talked about, actually. And I don't know that we've talked about it too much in the program yet, but I thought it would be kind of a good opportunity to share. You had said that like when we're working with chaotic forces, which we haven't really talked that much about,
Right.
How to go about that or anything like that, which I'm sure we will much later down the road. But
Sure.
but in general, like I always would think of that as encountering something scary, like nightmarish figures in a dream, or
Sure.
or situations or whatever. Um, but encountering chaotic forces within yourself, like in your own actions within the dream, is almost even more disconcerting, right? And
Right.
and something even relatively minor, like like what I just described, could still have an effect on you. Like I woke up and I had this feeling of like, wow, there was, I could feel that like there was a part of me that would like enjoy doing that, or like enjoy like resolving the situation through kind of some like such an aggressive or like almost violent action. And so, but as I was having those feelings waking up, it was like it popped into my head the things that you've said about that before. It was like, oh, like this is a very, very minor example of like of acting out your own chaotic forces in a dream, and having that like have a real effect on you, and in a way that you may not expect, or were able to predict or whatever. So I don't know
Did
if you
let me just interrupt you and give you like maybe an alternative view to that too. Since we just sort of dipped our toes in it, did you recognize the two teachers, the older teachers that came out or whatever? I mean, did
not
you
as
know them?
specific teachers that I used to have.
Yeah.
Not really, but it definitely like kind of evoked like the feeling that I would have like in younger classes of like the like authority teacher female figures that like I didn't like, or that like kind
Trying
of,
to restrict you, right?
yeah, restrictive, yeah, exactly, yeah.
And so, here's my thing with that little scenario, right? It's like when I hear that, this is the first thing that popped into my mind. So here's, something that's of you. I mean, those two, they are aspects of you. And so they're the ones that are authoritarian and, older, sort of remind you of older teachers that are sort of, they're stuck on, sort of antiquated rules and rules just for the sake of rules. And it's all about control, right? Controlling your charges, controlling youthful enthusiasm. And what have I been saying? It's like, you've got to embrace that youthful enthusiasm, right? Be childlike, be game-like, really engage it on that level, a little bit more enjoyment of the whole process. And, here's these two coming out, trying to constrict that. And what have we been saying? When you find those chaotic forces, you burn them, right?
Mm, mm, mm.
And so there's even another part of you in the back, that's saying like, part of that subconscious that remembers that part. Now, how it brought it out as the fire starter or that kind of thing is one thing. But basically, I mean, I think you were just trying to, one part of your subconscious was seeing another part of your subconscious as saying, oh yeah, I know what we do with these chaotic forces that are trying to stymie this progress that I'm trying to walk down this hall and be even more free, fly down this hall. And they're coming out in mass to sort of constrict that. Well, we burn those things. We take those to burning meditation and we burn them, right? And so to help release them or weaken them in a way that we can exert our own control and say, like, this is what I want to do and this is what I will do. And, and I move forward with that rather than, be, constricted. The days of being, constricted, with a hall pass or whatever, so that you have to follow the straight and narrow rules of, uniforms in school and whatever else, that are just sort of arbitrary levels of control. Right. So, and, to sort of break the back of the people that are there. So they'll, certain things they'll conform to society or whatever that is, however we want to take that out. But that's the idea. So I think that, I think that was a very appropriate, kind of response. Both interpretations, I think, again, as a hermeticist, I can tell you that, I wouldn't reject one for the other. One may feel more powerful for me than the other, and I might want to adopt one, but it doesn't mean that I have to exclude the other one completely. I can have both of those scenarios sitting with equal measure on both sides and say,
yeah,
this or that, it's both. And okay, so what do I do about that? And as I go into, like, maybe I would take it to the burning meditation, bring that segment of that dream up and literally burn those chaotic forces down into some kind of compliance, so that, and then, find yourself flying down the hallway, that kind of thing, not in an aggressive, like take that kind of thing, but more like more like, no, I won't be restricted,
Right.
So I'm going to continue this adventure and I'm going to keep moving, and I'm going to move even more freely now without you two around.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah. But it can also, I mean, like you said, I think that's really cool to think about it in that way. And it does make sense. And like you said, it can be both, right? So,
oh yeah.
But it was interesting waking up with that feeling, and being like, oh wow, like if I hadn't had you say certain things about, like, that those are some of the things that happen in a lucid dream, or you can initiate the exploration or understanding of those chaotic forces on a deeper level, but that you kind of have to be kind of, prepared to do it, mentally prepared to do it in a way that will, help you to understand that's what those aspects of ourselves are, or that's what they, that's just their nature. So, experiencing them is, I don't know, it's almost like it's not personal or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's not, and it is extremely personal because it's us that's doing it, aspects of ourselves that are doing it, right, at this point. So it's like, it's very, it's actually uber personal, right? Because it's like there's nobody there except us. So,
Right.
Right? It's like there really is nothing there. I mean, the environment is you, all the characters are you, even the mugwort flowers were you, an aspect of you. And so there isn't anything that isn't you in that environment at that point. So you've created all of this scenario in order to experience something, right? And have some revelations and move on from that. I mean, the last thing, I think the thing that we're, other people that are teaching lucid dreaming too, they sort of touch on it cursory about, dealing with these sort of adverse events, nightmares, whatever, dealing
Shadows,
with
shadow
shadows,
work, or whatever they
or
call it.
whatever they want to call it. It's all nice little, euphemisms for just, dealing with chaotic forces. And so I think that, it's a big aspect of it. But, if you go into it unprepared without this sort of background information like we just shared, I think that it's all you, but that doesn't negate the reality of it on the inside, right? When you're there, it really feels like you're in a physical reality, right? So, I mean, some of the laws of physics don't work the same way, but it has the sense in every way that we can sort of think about from a sensual view, right? From sight and sound and all these things, even maybe hyper that, right? But at least as real as this. And so, and the idea that I'm trying to point out is that, people here and now, we go into certain situations, and it's not just soldiers that get PTSD or whatever, right? It's like we have scenarios in our lives, whether it's, could be losing a spouse or a child, or, not all horrific things either, right? But I mean, it's like stuff that we're unprepared to deal with. And it can sort of taint our whole experience after that, and skew it to some direction, right? Well, lucid dreaming is no different than that. I mean, it's like if you can come out of it and try to convince yourself. I mean, how many people have had a nightmare that was so palpably scary, right, that they woke up in a pant and a sweat and all of that, and like they literally physically chose not to go back to bed, not to go back to sleep that night. And maybe even were thinking about it the next day, thinking like, I do not want to go back there no matter what. So, it can be very traumatizing, right? Or reliving a scenario over and over again in a dream time, right? That your subconscious is just offering you, the way that I think about those things isn't just like some uncontrolled circular thinking in somebody's head. It's your subconscious saying, this is a wound. This is literally a wound in you. And I'm giving you multiple opportunities to change it, to heal that wound and change it. Whether, and sometimes, we just sew the wound up. There's some, smaller amount of pain that we go through in order to heal that. And, and maybe it is reliving it several times and engaging it in a different way. If we're consciously lucid in that dream, right, we can do that.
Do you think that that's the cause of most repeated themes in dreams? Like,
I do,
because I have a a at least one scenario that presents itself like in many non-lucid dreams, and it's usually like tidal waves at the ocean at my grandmother's house, like crashing and like lifting me up, and like, so I'm still trying to figure that one out. But at the same time, like I always think about it and I'm like, oh, okay, like what's that about? Is it just like, okay, this is a dream sign that's trying to wake me up? The ocean maybe is my subconscious, and yada yada, and and so I'm still kind of pondering it, but it's just I guess yeah, I just asked that question, like, do you think that that's kind of like the main theme behind those types of things that come up regularly?
I do. And again, I don't say that lightly. I just say it, with my own experience and with people, other students that I've talked to, other practitioners that I've talked to. It seems to be kind of a consensus that that's what it is, or at least, once you're logically engaged in that process, it seems that resolves things. I can tell you, at least for myself, 5 dreams that were recurrent from my childhood to when I really started to get a handle on the lucid dreaming, and then one that wasn't even involved in the lucid. It was a lucid dream that I had, repeatedly. I mean, easily once a month my whole life, up until that time when I did something to help resolve that, not really knowing what that was, just sort of purely by accident, and then I never had it again after that. And that's usually what happens for me. It's like I see, and for other people, it seems to be the consensus. Once I've taken care of it in an adequate way where I feel like I really am in control and I've made choices, whatever those choices are, whether to burn the old biddies trying to give you a hall pass, detention, or charming them and walking away, with a swagger, and they're like, oh, he's such a bad boy. It's like, oh, but he's okay. Let him go. However you deal with it and maybe multiple ways until you're just satisfied that, you got it, you got the essence of what that was, and you resolved it in a way that was good for you. And so, it's not always about burning everything down, right? It's about learning different ways. And, the funny part is we don't really have to think about it in that way, because, your subconscious will keep playing it out until it feels you've resolved it in a way that is good for you, that really resolves the issue, and that you can see that issue come up in other scenarios in your life, and you're going to be able to identify them and just take them out of the picture and neutralize them with the right course of action. And I really believe that that's what happens there. And it's amazing that we can do that to ourselves, and that we have this opportunity to sort of go through these scenarios that trip us up. Every human being, I don't care how famous or how well off you are or not, it's like you can literally work these things out in your own head at night while you're sleeping. I mean, it couldn't get, yeah, there's some effort involved, right? There's some sacrifice involved in achieving the ability to do that, but holy shit. Come on, could you possibly think of another scenario except having, this is just so much more difficult. If I were thinking of another way to actually have that, would be, having a whole troupe of professional actors, work out these scenarios that you've written out and completely, once they play their parts and they're done with that, that you can erase their memories, so they don't ever keep a working memory of your deepest, darkest secrets and how those things, it's like, it's mind boggling. And, but I think that the benefits for that are just so incredible that, I really do believe that it's one aspect of really evolving yourself in such an exponential way that, it's crazy not to take advantage of it.
And you think that the process can be more or less organic? I know that at some point we'll probably talk more about like intentional ways of like setting up dreams or initiating certain experiences through dreaming to intentionally learn about how to progress in different territories of your life. But at least with repeated themes in dreams like this, it's kind of, you're basically saying that like, we don't have to worry about like, what am I going to do next time I'm in there? Or like, how am I going to make sure I bring that up to figure out what it is or resolve it? It's more like, okay, I'm like, next time it happens, as we increase in lucidity, we'll just be able to recognize that we're in that situation again and try to like figure out what's going on or communicate with the dream itself. That's something we haven't really talked about a lot, but I've read a little bit about like asking the dream itself questions, or asking characters there questions about like, what do you represent? Or all of those
things are available, possible for you. It's like, and everybody will find the way that's maybe it's saying most comfortable would be pushing it too far, but will be the most beneficial for them, right? The thing that will stimulate their growth the most. They'll find the scenarios that really work, because again, if you're making it all up in your head, right, and you just sort of like, maybe you're just a really good burner, right, and but like every time you come against an obstacle, you just burn it down, right, but you don't really learn anything from that, because you can't do that here. Like, they're walking around with one of those Elon Musk flamethrowers, it's like,
I'm the best.
People just give you a wide berth, right? It's like, don't screw with him, he's a burner. you know, so.
What do you do in your lucid dreams?
Really,
I set everything on fire.
that's right. That's right. This is how nature says, "Do not touch." Right. So,
Yeah.
um, but you know, it will find a way, because remember, it knows you better than you know yourself. You know, your subconscious is the majority of you, which you have very little to no access to for most people, right? It's just, we see it in hindsight. We see it as our habitual patterns that come out, right? And they're not always pleasant. So, but if we can retrain ourselves and see, you know, through scenarios, because I mean, you think about it, you know, like if we take it on a more mundane level, like think about these businessmen, right? The entrepreneurs, all these people that say like, oh, if I lost everything, I'd just build it again, because it's a skill set. You know, it's like, I know what to do. I know what to ask. I know where to go. I know who to talk to. I mean, you know, it's like all these things, they've just repeated it. You know, these serial entrepreneurs, they've just repeated the same process over and over and over again with different scenarios or whatever. But they know that skill set that they need in order, and they recognize the things that are coming up way before they ever come up, so they're already proactive about doing that. Well, imagine somebody, you know, being able to do that mentally, right? And you know, sort of saying, I don't want to be this type of person anymore. How would I progress through these things? How could I have done this differently? And working through maybe, you know, dozens of scenarios to finally get comfortable with it. But once you have it instilled and you see it coming before it happens in a lucid dream or a regular dream or in real life, right? It's very easy to translate that sort of mental attitude into, you know, your daily waking existence as well, right? So you, in a way, in doing that, you feel better about yourself, because we all feel good when we overcome a scenario that seems to be against us, or at least not in our favor, right? And we pull it out in like an exquisite way, right? Where it's not just good for us, but good for everything. And that's like, you know, I mean, that's the ultimate, you know, human goal as far as I'm concerned. It's like the win-win-win. You know, it's good for me, it's good for you, and it's good for the environment around us, right? So whether that's your society or your company or friends or family or community, right? Or the world. So it's like that's like, you can really pat yourself on the back for coming up with those scenarios and implementing them, right? So I just feel like, you know, when it comes to that stuff, I mean, it's just, it's a skill set that can be learned through this technique of lucid dreaming, because you can repeat the scenario over and over again, so that it's not just how you resolve it, but recognizing it so quickly, and then saying like, oh, this is this scenario. Let me apply myself in the best way that I can with this. And you've done it so many ways that within that scenario, whatever it is, you're applying yourself in the most appropriate way to achieve the best goal possible, you know, for everything involved. And so, I mean, it's an amazing ability, and it's an amazing thing to even put out there for people. I mean, it's like and one of my teachers a long time ago said, you know, if you compare that to somebody who, let's say, is a philosophy major in college, and they're good at, you know, sort of talking in riddles and you know, whatever, and but they haven't come up against scenarios in real life that would put their philosophy to the test. Not really. I mean, it's all theoretical, or a lot of it's theoretical. So, you know, how much better is this? I mean, it's basically like living. You know, how many times will that come up organically or naturally in your physical surroundings? Maybe never, right? I mean, it's a crapshoot, right? I mean, unless you're in an industry that it puts you in that position many, many times. But it may not come up. So how would you test it out? How would you know? How would you change that aspect of yourself and make it something that, you know, you'd be proud to say, you know, I did it this way and it was good. You know, the end result was good. Well, you know, you do it, you could really put that issue to bed just by doing it dozens of times in lucid dreaming, and really being able to recognize it no matter what form it comes in, no matter what guise it comes in, right? The packaging can change, but the the core of what's inside is the same. And you see it so clearly now that it's easy to deal with when it comes up for you.
Right.
And I think that's invaluable, whether you ever have that situation here or not. Again, many times you won't have the situation anymore here because you've already resolved it so many times. That's the mysterious part of it, right? If you have a scenario, here's one of the things that, that I've seen. It's not foolproof. I have had other things happen, but maybe it's because I didn't really resolve it as well as I thought I did. That could very well be the case. But many times if I really feel like, not only have I gone through this scenario dozens of times to find out the best way to deal with these things, and no matter when I see it coming up in a dream or a lucid dream or whatever, I'm able to really deflect it or turn it into a scenario that's good for me at the time. I never have that scenario come up here again. It's very weird, but that's somehow it crosses over. It's almost like it feeds into that idea with some traditions where they say, like, everything here is a test, right? And once you really learn to resolve certain issues and really learn to deal with it in the best possible way, you don't need to do that anymore. So those things divert from you in some way. So that's that mystical part again that we're not really sure how that works. It seems to follow those lines. And that's, again, another one of those reasons that I think, lucid dreaming is such a powerful tool. I mean, who doesn't want to, knock down, in a consistent way, things that have, things that you take responsibility for, but that you see have held you back in life because you didn't see it, somebody played you, blah, 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 you didn't see it coming, you were too busy with one thing and you forgot about the other. All of these scenarios, I mean, there's tons of them for every human being for the most part, right? And so, what better gift could you possibly give yourself than figuring those things out or having them presented to you in a way that you can resolve them every night of the week? It's like, holy hell, come on.
Right.
I think it even took 50 times. Can you imagine resolving? Let's say you had, I don't know. It took 50 times, let's say, to resolve a single issue, really to the degree that I'm talking about. Well, who that you know of, and I can tell you for me, nobody that I know of could resolve 4 major mental issues in their personality, per year. I mean, that's like insane. No, I don't care if you could have Sigmund Freud for, he's never going to be able to do that kind of resolution for you. It's like, and many of these things are hidden, right? These scenarios that come up, they're hidden by the things that are above them, right? So it's like one issue hides a number of other issues, but until you remove that capstone, those other ones can't pop up, right? And they could be more minor or bigger, but you need to sort of remove some of the debris. And every time you do, you're seeing more clearly. There's less things that are sort of startling and shocking and sort of catch you, they don't blindside you. Let's put it that way. So I just feel like that's one of those apex things that happens with this tool. That's just, there's no way to not paint that as a good picture end result wise, right? I mean, when you're doing it, it's a pain in the ass and can scare the shit out of you, but and you get squished a lot of times, but if you're persistent and you go and having that more playful attitude about it and saying like, oh, and that really sucked, I didn't like the outcome of that, okay, I'm going to try it again tomorrow or in 2 days or whenever I do it again, right? I'm going to manipulate it and go through that again. And I know it won't be the same scenario, it'll be slightly changed, but I'm going to be looking for it and engaging my, subconscious in a way that says like, I really, really want to do this.
It's kind of, it actually, talking about it with you now, it gets me pretty excited about continuing with the dreaming and getting better at it. In some ways, I think like we said in the beginning, or I think we said it on the last live call, or last coaching call, you were saying that you reserve, like, if you're going to do lucid dreaming, like 3 nights a week, you'll do like one night of getting rid of stuff or resolving the types of things that we're talking about, one night of projecting out to future things, and one night of like fun, right? And so, and even though like most of the lucid dreams that I've had up to this point, like I haven't, let's say, had enough control or enough lucidity to really, like, like I started to fly, right? But then immediately like face this challenge, right? So it's like fun flying, challenge facing, like whatever. But so it's not like I feel like I have enough control yet to really just explore what that means,
Right.
But but like but the idea of like working through these types of scenarios, like even the example that I gave about, I have this repeated dream, there's tidal waves crashing into my grandmother's house, it's the same location, some of the same people are always there. Like, it's almost fun to project forward and think like, okay, I'm going to find myself in that dream. At some point, I'm going to find myself in that dream and I'll be lucid and I'll be able to like move around in this house and talk to the people and see, respond and try to react in different ways and figure out what's going on and understand what it's all about and how I can figure out what this scene means and transition it into something new. Like, yeah, there may be nights of like just fun lucid dreaming, but to me, like, working through those things could be, that sounds just as fun. I mean, maybe it's just because I like work, I like progress, I like producing good things and new things in my life. But like, to me, that's like, I'm
Well,
like, I
this
want to
is
get
the
in there and do
this
that.
is this is the mental equivalent of, like, I mean, to me, this is practical spirituality, right? This is guerrilla magic, as I would like to say, because it's like you utilize the tools that you have inherently to make, vast progress, and to see these things that are repeated, and that you're able to recognize them and deal with them in the most efficient and beneficial way possible. There's a real level of, um, without being, too cheeky, it's like there's a certain level of almost invulnerability to that you get this sense, like, okay, well, that took me 51 times to figure that out. But now I feel like I really have it. And the next few that come up, you recognize it, and you're not even thinking about it. It's like training muscle memory, right? Like there's a, muscle memory with like martial artists, right? I mean, with other athletes as well, but it's sort of like things happen so quickly, you can't think about it. Thinking is actually too slow. So your body responds the way that it's trained. Good training, good result. Bad training, bad result, right? So in a way, this is almost mental muscle training, right? It's like it's this muscle memory, mental muscle memory, right? And so you're actually, without being hyper vigilant all the time, you just recognize a scenario that comes up at work, and you see it, like, is this really happening? Like, that was my first response. Like, am I just projecting, or is this really happening right now? That in my head, I was going through it. Like, I see where this is going.
You mean like how we're having a physical experience in life?
It was a mental, it was a mental sort of, like, it was an argument in a business scenario. And I could see the person was baiting me to go into a certain place. And I would have gone there normally. But I saw it coming so far. It was almost like the person was like, now we're going to piss you off. It's like, and it's like,
But you were able to see that because of the lucid dreaming training that you've done.
yes. And it's like, and it's so amazing because you have both of, for me anyway, maybe I'm just a freak when it comes to that stuff, but it's like almost like that old, what was it? One of those movies that I grew up with. I can't remember what it was, but there's like the little, I think it was Animal House, right? Where there's a little angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, and it's like, do this, do that. No, don't do that. Oh my gosh, that's so bad. Oh no, go ahead, do it. It's all fine. It's like these scenarios playing in my head, like, really? Are they really going to go there? And seeing it as being so obvious at the time, where before it would not have been obvious to me, and I would have stepped right into it, and had many times. And so, but by seeing it so early, it was like, oh wow, this is almost like, it's kind of like everything slows down in a weird way, and it's like you're seeing it for what it is, and the most appropriate thing to say. And not just but you say it, and you do it, and it's the right thing to do, and it works out in the very best possible way. And that's when you really know, like, wow, that was incredible. And it's such a high that, you can't wait to get back and do another one. You can't wait to get back. It's like, 51 times. I would have done 500 times to have that effect.
Totally.
No problem, because it's just, it's made the flow of my life so much better. It's not effortless, but it's so much better. I mean, it's like, I feel like my life is taking the track of some, great surfer, who just like senses the wave and like starts moving before everybody else, because they just feel something with all of their senses stretched out that is starting to pick them up and move them, and they want to match themselves to that, and then they just ride this thing with, in this flow state, and I feel like, your life becomes like that, and it gives you, in a weird way, it gives you more time, right? Because even though that scenario was slowed down and you made the best decisions and things worked out in the best possible way they could, that's sort of, I mean, think about how many things that we do in the day. And if we don't respond correctly, how much extra effort we have to put into those things to correct them, or to live up to, whatever obligations that we've put ourselves in, or any of these things, right? It's like we spend a shitload of time, like a huge, I mean, if you could calculate it somehow, it would be amazing. I think people would be in awe of how much time they're just treading water, just trying to keep their head above water, because of things they literally did to themselves with a misstep or a misdeed or a misword or whatever, and things that they didn't act on that they should have, and things that they acted on that they shouldn't have.
Right. It reminds me of that teaching from Castaneda, where Don Juan is saying you need to tighten up your life.
Tighten up your life. That's right. And this is one of those tools that can really, really make huge progress in that direction. It will dwarf what you'll save and actually, saving on one end, but actually, compound interest on the other end of being able to do more in a better way. It dwarfs the amount of time and effort you put into being able to learn to do this. That's my thing. It's like, when I look back, I'd be like, my God, I would have spent, 10 times the time that it took me if I had known ahead of time, like, this is what it's, this is what it's going to be. You're going to have this ability, if you stick with it and get in there and do it, and, forget about the ones that are failed attempts and, can't go to sleep, or a couple sleepless nights, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, it's like, I would have put my 100% full attention on that. It's like, there's no way that I wouldn't have done it.
And I think it's tough to gauge a little bit in the beginning, because I remember every other time that I've tried to get a handle on lucid dreaming outside of the way that we've done it in this program, I kind of started to lose heart with the practice after like a month or two. And it hasn't been until a little over 3 months now of really dedicated practice and focus on it, where I can see like, okay, like, starting to gain momentum. And now I can actually imagine like being able to extend that time of being there and actually do something productive like that. Like, it's like, I don't know. It's
well, and the progress isn't linear either, right? I mean, this is the thing. Once you get your toe, you sort of dipped in that, right? It's like the progress becomes exponential. Now, I think a lot of it is because the attitude shift, right? It's like, as much as excited as you are to be able to do it in the beginning, right? It's like you said, so at a certain point in time, it can be lackluster if, you have other things coming up, which they always do when you're trying to do this stuff, right? It's like
Yeah,
everything comes all at once.
I should mention, like, that did happen. There were like week long or 10-day or sometimes 2 week chunks of time in the middle of some of the months that we started this where things were like tumultuous for different reasons, and it was just like, oh wow, that whole 2 weeks I couldn't really focus on the practice very much. And it was like, so that, you saying that stuff comes up, like I can attest to that from my experience, even with this.
No, it's practically proverb. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's without putting it out there too strongly. I mean, I really think it's designed that way. In some way, shape, or form. I mean, I'm not saying who designed it or what designed it, but I do believe that it's when the more esoteric texts or whatever, they talk about these guardians at the gates and the watchtowers and all of these things. I think that like other let's say sacred texts, like the Bible or any of these other spiritual texts, right? That they talk in people either take them literally, and maybe they do in the beginning, and then they sort of move on and they understand it a little bit better, and it becomes more of a metaphor, right? And I think that these things are the same, right? The watchtowers are, can you personify them in a way that's scary and, occultish and whatever? It's like, yeah, sure, you can. If that's the best way for you to engage it, then go for it, as long as it's producing results for you. But the other way is just like, can we look at it from a more generic standpoint of like, almost, again, like, not to beat the reference down, but it's like, Don Juan speaking to Castaneda, and like the barriers, there's the guardian, the barriers, it's like there's these things that are there that can seem personified or could seem to have a persona, but they're really just, they're things that are there to, sort of separate the wheat from the chaff, right? So it's like, for those people that are really, not involved, that don't have the tenacity, that don't have the ability they have the ability, obviously everybody does, it's just latent, but if they don't have that discipline and the things that they need in order to get through those adversities, I mean, that's why those things are there. It's like, in a weird way, it's sort of like, don't muck up the walkway by just, the walkway is to walk. Don't just stand there and block the entrance for others. It's sort of, I feel like there's this weird, it kind of, I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's like, I mean, another thing would be like, like maybe you're just not ready for it. Right. And it's like, once you get there, I mean, you can push it. And once you get there, I mean, I don't tend to ascribe to this, but, it does take some tenacity, right? To get to do the training, to like spend your time, your talent, and your treasure on the training to begin with. And, and even if you had a friend that was going to teach you for free or whatever it was, right? They may not give you all the information or whatever, but say they're pristine, they can do all that, but you still have to do it. They can't do it for you. It'd be like me going to the gym for you. It's not happening. I can do it be as altruistic as possible. Your muscles aren't going to do anything if I'm going to the gym for you. I'm going to get better, but you're not.
So it sounds like you don't necessarily know why those things come up so consistently, those challenges, or like almost opportunities to say like, oh, like it's too much, or I can't do this, or I've got too much going on right now, or there's always opportunities to say maybe another time.
Right. And we can speculate. Yeah. And we can speculate about that, what's the origin of that, or what's the real mechanism behind that, if there is one or whatever. But, it's sort of that I always sort of fall back on this. It doesn't matter if it's real or not real, right? The universe acts as if it is real. And this is the thing, right? It's like, is there something? Well, it certainly feels like, something keeps throwing all these barriers up when I'm trying to do this.
And you
And
think that
is
that's
it just testing me? How much do you really want this? It's sort of like your dad saying, like, oh, you want me to, give you $200 for the prom or whatever it is. Well, I've got all this other stuff that I need done around the house that I can't get to, maybe you'd want, maybe we can come up with a bargain. Maybe we can come up with a deal for that. Is it worth mowing the lawn every Saturday, instead of hanging out with your friends, for the next 6 weeks or whatever it is? And, if so, well, I could go for that. And, or, you work out something, right? It's like a negotiation. And then you really have to ask yourself, oh man, that's 6 weekends where I don't get to hang out with my friends on Saturday. I'm going to be here stuck doing lawn work. I'm going to be a landscaper. Damn, that's not fair. Blah, blah. You come up with all these scenarios, right? And it's like, but there's that idea, and that's a barrier, right? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. And I think of this stuff as the same way. Like, there's always a price. I mean, nobody gets anything for free. There's always a price, right? And so, I mean, and there's always some kind of sacrifice. There's only so many hours in the day. And when we kind of cheat with lucid dreaming, but other than that, we won't go there right now, right? So, but uh, but for everything else, especially in this physical environment, there's a cost for everything, right? And so some of them are hidden. Some of them, the best ones are the ones that are overt. Like, it's going to cost you 6 weekends of yard work to get your $200 for the prom or whatever it is, right? And so, those are the nice ones, right? There's no fine print. There's no hidden stuff there, right? It's just like a straight direct trade.
right.
And so,
And it was interesting too to see, just to recognize that every time I went through one of those challenges, it was like, because the practice seemed to slow down, I didn't have time for this or that, or it were periods where it was like, oh, I'm not even remembering my dreams as well. It was like I had to re-encounter those feelings of like, oh, it's never going to happen, or like, it's, whatever those internal, like, whatever it was, barrier for me. It was another opportunity to experience those things and be like, how are you going to feel about this right now? Are you going to get all like down on yourself about it? Or are you just going to are you going to let it go and keep going as soon as you have time to re-engage it again? Or, how are you going to deal with this? So it's definitely interesting to watch those things play out. And so, but to get to this point now where, I'm just like, yeah, this is going to be great. Like, I'm going to keep going. I'm starting to actually get a toe in the door, so it's cool.
That's it. Exactly. It's like, it is, I mean, and again, no matter how well, I or anybody else articulates it, or, make it, seem fantastical, and we want you to be there, and, the best wishes in the world. And we try to give you every advantage and every bit of information we can to get you in quicker, right? And experience it. Because once you experience it, I mean, my job becomes technical trainer at that point, right? It's not that, like, once it's like a trainer at the gym. Once you start feeling better, they're not holding your toes to the fire anymore, right? You're like, hey, I want bigger biceps. Hey, I want a better chest. Hey, I want to have, legs of steel, or whatever it is, or I just want to lose another 5 pounds and I'll feel awesome. This is it. And so, that you're motivated to do it now because you've seen some movement on your scale, right? You've seen some movement in the way you look. And the same thing with this, any little, experience of it, especially that first experience, to know that it's just freaking possible. I mean, holy, for most people, they may even give it lip service, but to actually experience it is something completely different, right? It's like, it's a life changer. It's a life-changing experience. And how many things in our lives do we have like that? I mean, in reality, really, it's like, how many things are like that for us? So
one of the things that you keep bringing up that's actually something I really wanted to talk about was something that really helped me in the last few days. I was reading again in Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, and then in the beginning of it, he is kind of presenting their philosophy of karmic prana and how the like negative emotions and energies, patterns of thought and action, and our typical reactions that have kind of been ingrained into us over how God knows how many lifetimes of whatever, both positive and negative. But the idea was that like there's this short section where he talks about the importance of mental training to develop a foundation of like stability and mental focus, so that the dreams aren't dreaming you or the thoughts aren't thinking you, right? And so, but when I read that, it wasn't like he said it explicitly, because I went back and read it again. I was like, did he actually say this? But it occurred to me, I was like, that the mind is a muscle. Like it's not different. It's just a muscle. So, and in the past few days, it's really changed like how even I've been practicing the shamatha practice from this week, where it's like when I sit to do it, I just have like this different attitude where it's like I'm not just kind of doing it to do it because it's part of the program that I know will help me lucid dream, maybe,
Yeah.
or fully or whatever. It's like, no, this is an exercise just like when I lift weights. I'm just practicing the ability to stabilize and focus my mind so that as the habitual thoughts or the habitual dreams arise, I can have that stable foundation of clarity and awareness to, because obviously that correlation between meditation and lucid dreaming is that they're the same, right? So
Right.
the ability to maintain clarity, focus, stability through a dream is the same as, to do the same with thoughts. So I'm like, okay, but I it's just, I think it's also made the phenomena of lucid dreaming seem less abstract or daunting.
Yeah.
Again, it's just like any other type of training, and it's made it feel less like daunting or personal or abstract or woo woo or something like that, where it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how can this, like it's just a magical thing that happens. It's like, no, it's just a muscular thing. You're just flexing a different type of muscle.
Yeah. In
uh,
the beginning, you couldn't lift 5 pounds. Now you're lifting 50.
right.
Because not just instantly some magical thing happened and you ended up with Arnold's body, right? It's like, all of a sudden, it's from incremental increases and repetition of training that produces that end result for you. And so it is the same thing. I mean, that's why we do that's why if you look at a lot of the traditional trainings, these types of things were more of at least in the beginning, if people would come to you, students would come and say, "Oh, I'm having this. I felt I was awake in my dreams." Like, oh, okay, it's a lucid dream, or okay, that's dream yoga or whatever it is, and whatever name we would give it, right? It's a light dream or whatever. And so, but in the beginning, it was sort of like, oh, it's an outcropping of the training that you're doing, because most times what a lot of the traditional training shows, being able to focus intently on a certain point, and then, you know, so the diverse focus, right, and the converse focus, right? So it's like, you're able to focus on a very specific point and then open your focus up and meditate on, things that are, in a much more amorphous state, right? So like the space around a point or whatever it is. So, which can be very abstract until you start really looking at the different examples, physical examples, right? And then it's like one will hit you and just go, oh, okay, I get that. It's like, and they do a lot of those tricks where it's sort of like having somebody say, look at those pictures. I know there's a right term for them, right? But I can't think of it right now. But it's sort of like this, like a palindrome in writing, right? Where it says the same thing forward and backward. It's like, you see this picture, what is it? Some people see a vase and other people see two faces facing each other, two
Like a
profiles.
Rorschach test or whatever.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so it's like, oh, it's your perspective, right? And it's how are you in a divergent or a convergent focus, right? Or convergent and divergent focus, right? So it's like, some people will naturally have the tendency to move one way and then natural tendency to do the other, right? And so they have to work on the one that's weaker for them so they can balance out those two things. And we never really know, I mean, obviously there are some clues that we could say, oh, this person definitely has an ability to sort of, pick out the trees within the forest, right? But we don't want them to be too focused on that and miss the forest for the trees, right? And just the converse as well, right? So, and, but that's why a lot of the traditional trainings, I think a lot of times they were so long, was because they sort of had to give everybody those abilities until they started to sort of suss out a little bit, and they could say, oh, this person's extremely analytical and they're very focused on the finite point. We need to give them more exercises that will open their view up to include everything else to balance that out. And then just the other, some people are really woo-woo and no structure, right? And so, we got to give them some structure to balance that out, right? To give them the best chance at getting into where they want to be and to be able to achieve, their own evolution. And hopefully, I mean, here's the part that's so exciting. We don't know who a person's going to be when they start, what are they going to become when they start doing these things? I mean, you literally could be training somebody who is going to make a huge mark on the world in a positive way, right? So it's like they're going to have the perfect articulation for something that is going to hit many people at once, and their experiences are going to be something that they can extend forward and produce positive effects for more than just themselves, right? Or inspire the next person to do that. So it's really, it's a very exciting proposition. It's not just saying, oh, when this person, makes $1 billion, they're going to be able to have huge financial impact. But we don't know, is it going to be in a positive direction? Is it just going to be making more billions? I mean, I've got nothing with capital, no bones to pick against that. I'm all for it. But the idea is, like, with this, it seems to, this type of evolution for a person seems to really move them in the direction of inclusiveness, and helping to move more than just yourself forward, even just by acting, outwardly here in a way that sort of reflects that. And there's nothing like a good role model to sort of light the fire under people's asses and go like, wow, okay, in comparison to me, I feel like I'm not doing everything I could do and I could do more. Maybe I should talk to him and see, or her, and see what's, how do they do this? How do they pull this, out all the time in such a good way? And, I have a few friends like that, and it's like, man, they're like on the top of my call list for anytime I have something that I'm trying to solve that it seems to be, out of reach or is seemingly confusing. It's like their insights are invaluable to me, right? Because they see things very clearly and maybe not in a direction that I would normally be looking. I mean, we all have our blind spots, right? So it's like, but as we go through this, as I use these tools, I hope to, make those blind spots more and more narrow, right? And less. And so that, I can make the best decisions for myself, and that reflects within my group and with, my family, friends, community, the world, right? Students, all of these people. So, and so I feel like there's nothing that I can think of that would have a bigger impact on a person than learning this ability, or tuning it to the level that they can endure.
Just two other things I wanted to say about that was, one of the things that you'd mentioned a while ago was, the importance of like timing your practice, and I found that combined with that attitude of like, I'm training the mind as a muscle, and that I'm just training a muscle, doing the shamatha with the, 8-minute segments, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, and then stop, or use that as a platform, after I get into that state, to do like 10 minutes of kind of lucid dream, imagining. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yep.
to strengthen those neural pathways. But even so, like, just timing it, makes it even easier to treat the exercise as an exercise in focus, and to not wander as much mentally, or, it's not like you're just going into the practice with kind of like I'm kind of doing it approach, but it's like, I'm doing I'm focusing on this for 8 minutes. I'm focusing on this for 8 minutes. And I'm not gonna like do it with force, right? Or whatever, but I'm going to be very diligent, because this is my exercise time. This is the time that's going to really have an
Right.
impact on my faculties. So, that's just, I don't know, that's just helped so much.
Well, it's a certain amount of resolve, right? It's like, I don't miss these things. Why don't you miss these things? Because they're very important for me.
Yeah.
They have great value to me. That's the thing. It's of great value to be able to move around, to mobile around in this physical world, and not be impaired by a bum leg or a sore back or a whatever, right? So it's like, I go to the gym because this is what it is, or I work out. If I can't get there, I do something else that's physical during that day, and all of that. So it's the same thing with this. I really think of it as being the same. There's a certain amount of resolve, because it's of high value, and we recognize that it's of high value. And again, once you have the experience, then the value becomes even more
and
so.
exponential high value, because, like, we all know the mental benefits of meditation in general, right? But
Right.
it's like we're using those benefits almost as like an initial platform for the exponential benefits that we've been talking about for lucid dreaming. So,
Right.
yeah.
It's all part of the system, right? It's like, I remember a couple of times, even with physical training, where it was like, why are we doing this? It was all, it wasn't, it wasn't a bad question to ask if you couldn't figure it out. Like, what's the purpose? Most things you could figure out physical training wise. Now we're talking, like most things you could figure out, but there are always these little obscure things here and there. It's like, okay, we did it, it wasn't good, or, it was easy and good, but why are we doing it then? What's the purpose? And sometimes they would say, because it's in the system. Like, when you need it, there's no way for me to project when you would need this little component put in the process, right? But at some point you may need it, and they realized that thousands of years ago. And even though in and of itself, this little cog or whatever, yeah, it's not that important. Will it work without it? For the most part, yes. But there's something about having it there that will actually make the whole system more efficient and more effective. And those scenarios may come up. And if they do, there are certain scenarios where that thing being trained and being in place will actually facilitate you moving forward. Where if you don't have it, you're going to have to go back and start over and go through it again to pick that up. And so
Right.
and I feel like that was some of this stuff too. It's like, yeah, it seems obscure, like it's redundant. We've done other things with the relaxation. How many relaxes can you do? It's like, there's all these different ways of doing it. There's all these different ways of burning off stress and mental fatigue. There's all these ways of sort of burning down chaotic forces and lessening them, right? And recognizing them and all these things. It's like, it seems sometimes, I think, from a student mind, it's like, oh, well, how many of these things can we, I've got that. It's good. I'm using this technique and that works for me. And that's great. You'll have your favorites, but you should learn more than one way to do it, right? Because there can be something that will come up in your life where that may not be possible. Like, if you only learn how to do burning meditation in an hour segment, what if you enter a place in your life where you can't get an hour to do that? It's like, and somebody says, oh, I do burning in 20 minutes. And you go, you can't fucking do burning meditation in 20 minutes. It's like, no, you can if you train it that way. It won't be as efficient and effective as an hour or 45 minutes or the long version, but you will get some done. And that is a cumulative process, right? And it will work over time. And so I think a lot of these things are literally just, you know, stepping stones to get to that place where once you're really engaged, now you have the basic tools to get in there and do something. It'd be like putting a freshman in a graduate class.
Right.
It ain't gonna go, right?
And
You're gonna understand the words, but you're not gonna get the meaning behind them.
Right. And I was thinking of that earlier when we were talking about working through these different scenarios, or resolving wounds, or these repeated dream scenarios that come up. Do you, I know many of us are excited about the prospect of like meeting a guide in a dream, or intentionally working with a certain type of spirit, or doing other types of, let's say, advanced types of energy work within a lucid dream. But I just got the sense, like when you were talking about working through scenarios over and over to resolve them, and the level of like comfort, not comfort, but like familiarity of being in a lucid dream, stabilizing the experience, working through it, getting comfortable with the sensations that you have in those states, and knowing yourself well enough to work through them on the level that we're talking about. It's like all of that kind of builds up to a really solid foundation that really will enable you to engage those more, let's say, more intense or novel experiences in a much better way, right? Like without that, without going through these things, it's not quite the same. Or
no, imagine being presented with a scenario that you could work through that's maybe has been common for you your whole life, and you've tripped over your whole life, or more times than not. And how frustrating it would be to sort of say, oh, okay, I've got one of these experiences, I can go through this. But at the same time, you have such little skill. Your skill set is so low that, you're trying to really pay attention. But at the same time, it's like you have to keep reminding yourself, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming. So you don't lose it. You don't get sucked into a regular dream. I mean, it's like that's, that can be very frustrating and very, I mean, just, frustrating is probably the best thing.
Because
even come out and you go, oh, because you really want to engage, and you have enough wherewithal to know that, but at the same time, everything starts shifting, and you have to, sort of, keep reminding yourself where you are and what you're doing. And, it's like, oh, and don't worry, it's, and coaching yourself and coaxing yourself through the next scenario. It's like, it's too much already. It's sort of like, learning to play a game, right? And everybody there has played the game many, many times, and you've only learned the basics. And so it's like, okay, put the left foot on this side and put the right on this side, shift your weight to the back, or swing the bat like this, and, keep your eye on the ball. And you're reminding yourself of all these things. And it's like, instead of just being able to play, right? And like, you've done it enough where it's the natural thing to just play and just do that. You don't have to be reminded of every little, pedantic thing that's going on there, where you're missing that, that sacred drama, because you haven't developed the skill set yet to engage it on a level that you don't have to think about that anymore. It's like, okay, I'm here, I'm lucid, I'm going to engage this now with my whole being, and come up with the best scenario for me, and so as opposed to saying like, don't lose it, I don't want to wake up.
Yeah, like better to like kind of cut our teeth on those experiences than, be presented with some, overwhelmingly awesome spiritual experience and then lose it in the middle because you couldn't stay lucid. And it's like, how much would you kick yourself because you couldn't remember that you were dreaming, and you woke up and whatever because you couldn't stabilize it, or
some spiritual entity that comes to you for the like glowing whatever, and and they say, I will answer any question you have, but only one. And you go, I'm only dreaming. I'm dreaming. I can't think of it as like.
And then you wake up and you're like,
you wake up and you're like, no. no.
I'll never live it down.
For you that night. No sleep for you that night. You're going to be too frustrated. So, yeah,
Yeah,
so
right.
I think it's that same thing, right? It's, you want to practice these things with that attitude that, like, oh, yeah, I'm building up these muscles so that when I get there, it's just going to be a much more adaptive flow for me. And I won't have to think about it so much. It doesn't mean you're going to be perfect on the first try, but it definitely means that the basic skill set's going to be there so that you can engage it at a much deeper level than you would be able to otherwise. It's just efficiency, right?
Yeah,
So
very
I
cool.
think that's part of cutting the learning curve down too, right? It's like, you don't want to, have so many of these frustrating experiences and then figure out, well, it's because you didn't do this and this and this. And, how are you trying to stabilize? What do you mean stabilize? How are you trying to stay there? It's like, what do you mean try to stay there?
Right.
It's like all of these things. It's like your feet are glued to the floor. How are you trying to mobile? What do you mean mobile? How do
Right.
why didn't you just change the scenario? What do you mean change the scenario? It's like all of these basic foundational things that you work through and you build up slowly but surely, and it starts from, you know, focus and divergent focus, right? Convergent, divergent, relaxation, being able to stabilize using shamatha if you want, or some other method like that to be able to go up the ladder and down the ladder, right? So it's like if something gets too heady, then I can center it more and sort of stabilize it and calm it down, right? And not be so engaged or whatever it is, and sort of have that bit of objective view of it, right? So there's all these things that it's easier to speak of in hindsight now. It's like, I know it's a lot. I know the tendency is to be overwhelmed. No matter how slow or how fast we would go in presenting the information, there's always the tendency to be overwhelmed because it's new, right? And it's like, and everybody's so engaged in the beginning, they want to do everything all the time. They don't want to miss out. Like, maybe this is the day, it's like, no, you have every day coming. So it's like, be a little bit systematic about it and put it in the right context. Know that it's a training tool to get that has an aspect that you will need when you engage lucid dreams on a regular basis. It's going to be critical for you then. Right now, it's just tools to help you get your foot in the door. But those tools will then, be foundational, uh, you know, uh, attributes for you that are going to be expanded on and built on, right? When that foundation is good, you can expand greatly, right? If those are kind of crumbly, then the weight of things above that are going to crush it down, and you're going to have to start in that territory again, or at least go back and correct that as much as you can. So which is frustrating for people.
Yeah. Well, I'm very much looking forward to the next segments of the program where we'll be talking about a lot of that stuff, like the stabilizing and mobiling and starting to build on what we've created. So
Absolutely,
it's very cool.
So good job, Dustin.
Thanks, man.
You rose to the challenge.
I
You
did.
rose.
I was hurting there, but it's starting.
I want to, if I was better with the video and all that, I'd go back to that first one and just replay a little segment over. It's like, oh my God, I don't know. I'm a little frightened. I don't know. It's a little scary.
Yeah. And then I think even in the last one, I was like, this sucks. Like, I haven't lucid dreamed in like 2 weeks or something. And you were like, 2 weeks? That's not a big deal yet. You're still training. Whatever. But yeah, it's cool. I'm really happy to know that through this training and the exercises that we've done and the routines that we've established, that I was able to push through those hurdles that I've never been able to push through before and get excited about it in a way that I haven't been before. So it's really cool.
Well, and it's producing results, right? So there you go. I mean, that's the proof is in the pudding in the end. It's like, good training, good results. Bad training, bad results. So that's the thing. It's I really do believe everybody can do this. It's just a matter of how tenacious are they? How much time are you going to put into it? How much are you going to immerse yourself in this? Those things sort of bring the end result of, it's either farther away or closer depending on how much of that you do. But it doesn't mean that you'll never get there. It just means, like, if you don't have that much time to spend on it, or you can't bring yourself to spend that much time on it, then that's okay. It'll just be, the goal will be a little farther off for you, but it doesn't mean that you'll never get there. I mean,
Right.
you can't expect to get there if you don't do anything, obviously.
Right.
But if it's just slower and you need more time, and you really want to get the relaxation down before you move to the next step, and you really want to get that down. I mean, we've cut the timing way down on this. I
It's
mean,
very accelerated.
it is very
And
accelerated. A lot of these things I would have spent months on, literally, like
well, I think,
relaxation, things like that.
yeah. Well, I mean, back to the very beginning of our conversation, the first several segments of this program were, we did them in 2-week segments, and now we're transitioning to 1-month segments. But even this week of this segment of the program, which we've titled, weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12, which will be released that way to members. It's like, because of our schedules and everything else going on, it took us two months to record this whole segment. So it's released to members in a more efficient time than we were even able to create it in. So I think that's good to know, that, like, regardless of where everybody's at, like, the pacing is, your own, and the aggressiveness of the pace of release is really only so that everybody feels like, they're never, the release of new material is never too slow.
Right.
It's never like, oh, I wish there was more. Why can't I, I'm that sort of thing.
When's the next segment coming out?
Yeah.
Like,
I always want it to be like, oh yeah, it's there. It's there when you need it. It's there for you, to progress. So yeah, no.
And to be fair, I'm the one that's usually saying, like, let's pull the reins back just a little, because I'm getting the sense that people are like, oh my God, there's so much to go through. I just started getting the relaxation down. It's like, okay, well, again, this is not just rhetoric. It's like, take your time, be efficient, be effective. It's like, always put your goal out there, what you're doing. Those little tricks that actually really create a lot of momentum, right? It's like, state what you're doing and what your end result is supposed to be.
Yep.
Tell yourself what you want, and, ask the questions. How can I make this more efficient? All of those little things, they're little nuances, but they make a huge difference when it comes to training and getting to your goal efficiently, right? And if it takes you a little bit longer, it's fine. But those are some of the things that can sort of speed up the process, right? Cut the learning curve down to some extent.
Yeah. And last night we recorded, it was live call number 40 was recorded last night. And in there, especially towards the end, you were talking a lot about, like, a playful attitude and asking your subconscious these playful questions. And I feel like even that had an effect on me in my practice last night too, where it was like, yeah, just kind of like, you said the more that you make it the more, like, serious you make it, the more it falls into the category of being a moralistic thing, whether you're, like, failing at the practices or succeeding at the practices take on the heavier weight of good and bad for you. And I think just hearing you say that really made me think about it in a little bit of a different way. And obviously, like, I know I still have a little work to do in terms of actually being able to actually really feel that way about it. But just the message, I think, had an impact on me. And so
it's kind of like, when you think about it, it's kind of funny. I mean, and of course, different people will have, there's room for personality here too. It's just that I've found that to be the most efficient and effective way of doing it, right? So, I mean, and I think about all the people that I've learned different things from, and sometimes multiple people teaching me the same thing, right, from a different angle. And I look at those as being really valuable because, I've had my share of sort of drill sergeants sort of, you're just going to do this and you're going to do this and step A and step B, and then you never go to C until you're done B, and, very, very uniformed and sort of like really pushing you. And there's a place for that, right? But then there's another where, I've had really good fortune of meeting a few people that were so highly skilled at a certain thing that uh, that it was like breathing for them. It was just so, and they were just the best in the business, and their attitude was so much different. It was more like, we just sat down and we talked for a long time first. Just like, like friends or friendly acquaintances. Like getting to know each other and attitudes about certain things, whatever. It didn't have anything to do with what they were there to teach me. But then it was like, when they were showing it to me, and it wasn't discouraging how easy it was for them to do certain things and sort of give me, instruction on how to get to this place or how to do this or whatever. And because it was a friendlier attitude. It was sort of like they didn't mind busting my balls about things. Like, oh, dude, you can't do that yet? Holy crap. It's like, oh, no, I'm just kidding you. It's like, don't worry about it. It's like, it took me a year to figure that out, so but it was just so, it becomes that engagement that's a lot lighter. And so even though, it's not like you've put less value on it, but the engagement of it in training it was sort of almost a cross between, it made me want to do it more, because not that I was going to impress this person, but I was, I wanted to, in some ways, I did want to please them, like, oh, the thing that I could give you the best compliment is if I do this really well, because that means that your teaching was excellent. And so I sort of had that attitude in my head, but the whole thing became a much easier way of going through the training. It wasn't less difficult. It was just the sense of ease that was there from that more playful attitude. It became more game-like, that it was like, oh, it's like, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Try this, so this is sort of banter back and forth. And it really was like, it engaged that childlike, hey, do you think you can hit that tree with a stone? It's like, I know you can throw it a long way, but how accurate are you? It's like, let's try a thinner tree. Oh, you got that one? Good. Okay. Well, so it's like, it became a game, right? And so it was like, yeah, you were trying your hardest, you were trying to do your best, but just that lighter attitude made it not so pressing. Like, it didn't feel like, okay, I'm gonna, if you don't get this one, I'm gonna smack you in the head with a stick. It's like, it wasn't that type of thing. It was, it was more like, you were competing against yourself and just trying to be better than the last time and show some progress. And you had a lighter attitude about it. Like when you got it, you were like spontaneous, like hoot, like, woo, that was awesome. It's like, let's move to the next thing. Okay. So I think a lot of times it's, though, engaging it with that lighter heart is it sort of engages a part of us that wants to try it over and over again. It's sort of like a kid, when they learn a new game, that's all they want to do, right? It's like, let's play, beanbag toss or whatever it is. Like, I bet you can't get it right in the center of the hole this time. It's like, whatever it is. And when they do, yeah, there's no contrived attitude, right? It's like, they're excited. It's like, they got it. They're like, they're looking for the high five. They're jumping up and down. They're squealing, It's like, there's that and complete joy of having achieved something.
Yeah. And just as much like, of that positive childlike attitude that you're talking about, just as much on the other side of it is like even in this book that I was reading, he was saying like, and obviously their training is very regimented, right? It's like this Tibetan thing.
Sure.
Got a system. It's very monk-like. And he was saying that one of the greatest hindrances to practice would be like beating yourself up about not nights where you couldn't do it. Cause he's probably working it like every night or something like that.
Every night. That's right.
Saying, like, I don't spend any time, beating myself up or ruminating on the nights where I wasn't lucid or whatever. And because that's one of the biggest hindrances. And I was like, okay, all right, cool. I really gotta let that go and just, I'm going to do what I do and do my best and then just keep going. So you know,
Yeah, it's they, you know, they're the first ones to admit, and it is a great attitude. And remember, these cultures, some of these cultures are extremely old, right? And so they've been doing this a very long time, thousands of years, thousands of years. Think about that. You've been doing it for 3 months.
right.
Thousands of years with thousands of people,
Mm.
right? So it's like, you know, they've got a lot of practical experience. And for them to make a point, even in a book translated into English that says, like, don't beat yourself up. It's the, you know, it's a detriment you don't need.
Mm.
So, you know, for them to actually say that's a key point, it's a key point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the takeaways from this, at least, you know, in this part of it where, you know, I still think that one of the best things that we've done with this program is the question and answer. And I believe this aspect of it too, like going through it and you know, just the check-ins with this, because look how diverse this conversation has been and touched on all these different attitudes and different topics and you know, sort of, but the general feeling of it was one of success. And the other thing is, you know, the lightheartedness of it. And even as much as I think that it's an extremely positive thing and a tool that is, I haven't found a better tool at this point for, you know, an evolutionary stance on yourself, right? Is that, um, um, you know, it's still light. It's still, you know, it's a friendly conversation. It's, you know, it's, you know, I just believe at this point, at least for our culture, that uh, this is the best way to go about it. If I find a better way, obviously we'll put it in there, but I just feel like these conversational aspects, they're really helpful for people because it's sort of the stuff that's underlying that doesn't always get said in a formal training where it's like, okay, we're going to go through this stage and then we're going to go through this technique and make sure you do this. And, you know, it's very analytical and very straightforward, very structured. And there's not a lot of room when we're trying to get the information out where all of these little things, these little nuances that, you know, you can hear and pick up and apply that make all the difference in the world. It's in the nuances, really. It's in the nuance of language. It's in the nuance of technique that you find these exponential jumps, you know, in your practice.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't have even, you know, I think it's why the first things that I brought up in this conversation and that theme that I brought up was like, you know, it really started to become more poignant, like those things that you said, you know, in just conversations like this that came back when I was in the middle of an experience and was able to say like, oh, I can just do this. But no, I know myself well enough to know that if it wasn't for those conversations and those suggestions that you made or those like tips or the things that you said over and over again over the years, you know, that's just like, oh, yeah, like I thought about it in a different way than I know that I ever would have. And so I think that that's true. Those things come through and I think they'll have, it gets me excited too, that I know that it will continue to have bigger impact on me over time, the more that we go forward in the practice. So,
Yep, absolutely.
all right, man. Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us, and hope it's going well for you in the practice, and we'll talk to you on the next live call.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Thanks, man.
All
See
right, you're welcome.